I'm Ponni Subbiah. I'm the Senior Vice President, Global Head of Medical Affairs, and the Chief Medical Officer at Acadia Pharmaceuticals. We are a company that's focused on both neuropsychiatry as well as rare diseases. Very excited that we got approval and launched the first and only drug called Daybue for patients with Rett syndrome. Since Daybue was launched in April of 2023, over 1,300 patients have initiated Daybue. Now, that's about 1 in 4 diagnosed people with Rett. Now, these prescriptions were initiated by over 650 unique prescribers. Now, this is really across a variety of specialties, predominantly pediatric neurologists, general neurologists, pediatricians, as well as allied healthcare personnel. Now, the age of the patients who received treatment is really across the spectrum, from as young as 2 to 4 years of age to adults, the oldest being 67 years. Now, both females as well as 4% of these prescriptions were actually in boys. Since it was launched in April 2023, those patients who initiated prescriptions from April of last year to May of this year, 7 out of 10 of these patients have continued on treatment at the 6-month mark. We have received feedback from both caregivers as well as clinicians is this partnership between the caregiver and clinician and observation of clinical benefits, as well as proactive GI management, really helps support this long-term use. Well, first, just like any disease, right? Different people get affected. So yes, these patients can be found across the country. We do have groups that are experts in this area, and these healthcare providers are typically in what we call centers of excellence. And so there is a group that's very specialized, and they provide multidisciplinary care. But we do know that there are patients who live in rural areas and who may not be near these centers of excellence. So those patients receive care from other clinicians. And that's why you see this significant number and the importance of ensuring that a broad group of physicians are educated on trofinetide, which has been an important goal for Acadia. The main goal of both Lavender, which was the pivotal study, as well as the open label studies Lilac-1 and Lilac-2, was to really study the efficacy and safety of Daybue or trofinetide in patients with Rett syndrome 5 to 20 years of age. Now, the Lavender study was the pivotal study that led to the approval of trofinetide in the US. Now, this study was a placebo-controlled study and was 12 weeks in duration. There were 2 co-primary endpoints. One endpoint called the Rett Syndrome Behavioral Questionnaire as an assessment completed by the caregiver. Well, the second co-primary endpoint was called the CGI-I, or the Clinician's Global Impression of Improvement. And this was completed by the clinicians. Now, at the end of 12 weeks, both co-primary endpoints showed statistically significant differences that favored trofinetide-treated group versus the placebo group. Even though it was only 12 weeks in duration, these benefits were observed. And this led to the approval of trofinetide in the US, with an indication that trofinetide can be used in patients 2 years of age or older in the US. Now, at the end of 12 weeks, all subjects had the option to participate in Lilac-1. Lilac-1 was an open label trial, which meant all patients who enrolled received trofinetide. And this was longer in duration. It was 40 weeks in duration, at the end of which patients showed improvements in the RSBQ compared to the baseline Lavender score. Improvements were also observed in the following trial, which was called Lilac-2. This was 104 weeks in duration. So now patients have received treatment for over 2 years now. And the RSBQ scores continue to show improvement compared to the Lavender baseline. Also, at the end of Lilac-2, we did semi-structured interviews with the caregivers to really understand in their own words what kind of improvements that they saw. This is really to complement the findings from the two co-primary endpoints that I mentioned. The most commonly reported improvements that were observed by the caregivers during exit interviews were improvement in engagement with others, hand use, eye gaze, improved attention, focus, and concentration. And so it really helped us understand, again, what the caregivers were observing in their own words, in addition to the statistically significant differences that were observed on the co-primary endpoints with lavender. Now, with regards to safety, as I mentioned, the goals of the studies were to look both at efficacy as well as safety. From a safety perspective, the two most common adverse events that were reported were diarrhea and vomiting across all three trials. Majority of diarrhea and vomiting were rated by the clinician to be mild to moderate in severity. And with long-term use, the safety profile was consistent with what we saw with lavender, with no new safety findings. There is actually three takeaways I'd like to leave with the audience. First is trofinetide, or Daybue, is the first and only approved drug for the treatment of Rett syndrome. And it has a broad indication. It is indicated for patients 2 years of age and older. It has been prescribed in patients both with typical and atypical Rett, as well as in females as well as males. Two, the efficacy and safety of trofinetide was confirmed in some of the largest studies that have ever been done in Rett syndrome. This included the pivotal registration study, as well as the 2 open label studies, which show both benefits as well as confirmed tolerability of trofinetide over the long term, in fact, over 2 years. 3, really important is the partnership between both the caregiver and the clinician in both initiating trofinetide as well as continuing this partnership and continued interaction to help support the patient on Daybue over long term. I think the main thing I would finish is Acadia's commitment to the Rett community and the importance we are giving to ensuring that clinicians as well as caregivers are educated on the data, as well as ensuring that we have all the appropriate resources to help both the clinician and the caregiver through our Acadia Connect program, which I hope will be utilized by the stakeholders that are involved in taking care of these patients with Rett syndrome.